My name is Brady Hupert. I'm from Northwestern Ontario, Sunset Country, Métis, Fort Francis.
Okay.
I, like myself with the gentleman that just spoke, I have a question also. But I have to say, I'm proud to be here. I'm proud I'm from the Homeland. My ancestor, Donald Ross, would be flipping over in his grave today. My question is, there's been so much and so long of a time that's gone past. There's been generations already with the MNO. There's been children within the MNO that have raised and now are becoming what they call citizens. There's a lot of hurt here, and this is going to create a lot of hurt. But nonetheless, we as our community being in the Homeland, and we went forward months ago and took the position with our citizens that we stay within the Homeland. And we're here to stay, that we are staying within the Homeland, and this is where we belong. Mm-hmm. But my only question is, why did not the MNC take this position 20 years ago and bring it to a head then, and it should have been stopped then, instead of this letting this go for so long? And that's my question.
Thank you. I'm going to ask President Chartier to come up to the podium.
Thank you for the question. It's a very important one, and it's a very fair question. And I, and Jim DeRocher, I'll have him share some of the blame. We're leaders here in Saskatchewan. I was the vice president. Jim was the treasurer. And we, joining the Métis from Alberta and Manitoba, made a decision in early March 1983 that we had to represent ourselves, particularly in the First Ministers' conferences that were coming, and I've mentioned some of this before already. We were then in an organization known as the Native Council of Canada, which the Three Prairie Métis organization started in 1971, but within several years, it became coast to coast to coast and pan-Aboriginal. And by 1981, when we were in the process of patriating Canada's Constitution and getting Métis into the Constitution, we found ourselves with only 3 seats on the Native Council of Canada board of 18. I shouldn't say 3 seats, 3 Métis. Actually 2 plus Jim Sinclair, who says he's not Métis, but who is a true and strong advocate for Métis Nation rights. So we had no choice. And there was an invitation by the Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, for the representatives of the Aboriginal people to attend the March 1983 First Ministers' Conference, where we would further define the rights of our respective peoples. At the end of the day, what happened is the Native Council of Canada board met with the treaty section of the AFN and with the Inuit people, and they decided to take Métis land-based and self-government off the agenda. And Native Council of Canada, without our presence, passed a motion that the president and vice president of the NCC would take those 2 seats. The president happened to be a non-status Indian from Ontario, and the vice president happened to be a status Indian from British Columbia, actually Bill Wilson, the father of Judy Wilson-Raybould. And they just shut us out. And that's why, March 8th of 1983, we said, never again will we allow anybody to speak on behalf of the Métis Nation. And as I said yesterday, in a pamphlet that we published in 1983, we made it clear that our nation is now encompassed by the 3 prairie provinces and extends into northwestern Ontario, northeastern BC, part of the Northwest Territories, part of the northern United States. We've never deviated from that. We continue to say that. And as I said yesterday, the first president of the Native Council of Canada in 1971 ironically became the first president of the MNO when they came in 1994. And as I said, in his testimony in the Pauli case, he was the registrar, and they started registering people. And he admitted on the stand in cross-examination by the Crown that anybody of Aboriginal ancestry, and further pushing from the Crown, he says, well, you know, as long as you're Indian, Inuit, or Métis, you can be registered. Now, that was a strong signal for us, but we kept telling them that you can't do this. It has to be evidence-based. And they said, well, we are doing work. We are doing research. We will bring you the evidence. And we kept believing. I kept believing. I became the president in Saskatchewan in February 1998, then elected October 2003 to the national position. I kept telling them it can only be Métis Nation citizens, because we made this vow in 1983 and we wanted to stick with it. But again, somebody says we're too kind-hearted. We give the benefit of the doubt. And we kept doing that. And they did their research. And you can go back and you can see resolutions. We passed our definition in 2002. And then we said everybody must follow this. In 2004, we came up with a policy that everybody has to be re-registered. And then we put out a pamphlet. It's in the report that I did. There's a pamphlet, or we put out a pamphlet stating this, and also that everybody is re-registering except for the Métis Nation of Ontario. They told us, when we said everybody is, no, put except for the Métis Nation of Ontario. So they didn't re-register their people like the rest of us were doing based on the 2002 criteria. Then again, several times we passed resolutions that you cannot grandfather in any of your previous members. But they kept saying, no, we're going to. So we were addressing this, but we needed something more concrete, I suppose, to make us act. And as I stated yesterday, as they say, the straw that broke the camel's back was in 2017 when they came right in your face. We had no choice at that time. They came right in front of us because we had no evidence before of who they're registering because you don't know. But they came out and said there are 6 new Métis communities in Ontario. Of course, one of which was Rainy Lake and Rainy River, but that's always been part of us. So they came up with 5 new ones in addition to the Pauli Great Lakes Métis, which was recognized as such by the Supreme Court of Canada as Section 35 rights holders. So at that point, we decided something has to be done. And our General Assembly, this was August 2017, in December 2017, our General Assembly passed a motion mandating me as the president to do an examination of this situation and come back with a report to the next assembly, which I did, and you have the report in front of you. It kind of says all of this in there. So it did take us much too long, I admit that, but again, I think, we try to accommodate people because we know we've been, oppressed and put down for a long time. So we always want to give people the benefit of the doubt and try to do what we believe is the right thing. But at some point in time, and that point came in 2017, when the government of Ontario, with the Métis Nation of Ontario, made this big declaration that, no, the Métis are everywhere, basically throughout Ontario. So that was just too much, and we had to act. And I wish we had have acted a lot sooner, but we didn't. And at the same time, why we know it's going to create a lot of hardship and heartache, and people aren't going to necessarily be happy with that decision, but at the same time, we ourselves have gone through this. In March of 1983, when we made this decision, the non-status Indians in the Manitoba Métis Federation, the non-status Indians in the Métis Nation of Alberta immediately withdrew, and they applied for core funding. In Saskatchewan, we had such a long history of leadership under Jim Sinclair, who was always a strong advocate for Métis rights. In fact, when I became vice president, I was the first leader in Saskatchewan to actually take forward a non-status Indian position, because I felt, well, we put them into our name, but at the same time we have to advocate for their rights, because they were looking for getting it back their rights under the Indian Act. And so we appeared in front of committees and we said, parliamentary committees, and say, look, amend the Indian Act, recognize these people's rights. But all the time previous to that, it was always about Métis rights, never about Indian rights, always Métis rights. And in this province, though, because of the long relationship, we had a tough struggle, and Jim Sinclair would admit to this, Jim would admit to this. We tried to stay together as long as possible, but it came to a point where we had to, in Saskatchewan, do a referendum in August of 1988, we actually had the referendum, August 1988, where we had a vote, stay together or have our two separate institutions. And we had a very close vote. I think it was about 53% to form Métis only and Indian only, and both went our ways, but there were still a lot of hurt and hard feelings in our communities. It took a number of years for that to be overcome, but we did overcome it, and in hindsight, we know we did the right thing. Mr. Sinclair, a great leader, received his Bill C-31 status and became a revered elder and spokesperson in the First Nations community, particularly with the Treaty 4 Council. So we all began finding our own places, but it was a painful process to go through, but in the end, it served us well. But unfortunately, it has taken us that much longer now to go through this process at the national level. But we have to do that, as we say, for our own sake, for our children's sake, for our future, it must be done.
Thank you, and I thought I wanted to answer that question myself also. I've been so long in the game of politics for our nation. And I guess the best way I want to answer to the Northwest Ontario, who belongs to our homeland, is the meeting I just recently had with some of the presidents in Ontario, in Kenora. But let me go back first from the days of Tony Belcourt, Gary Lipinski, on Margaret Froh. All of them has heard us loud and clear from Manitoba about defending our nation and who we are, challenging them on their grandfathering of their citizens, not abiding with the rules that we set forth as a nation. And I'm sure in many of the circles in Ontario, I was probably a picture they had on a wall they could throw darts at, because I was always speaking hard against Ontario, because I was trying to hold them accountable to what we all believe in, and understanding that it's important that we do be and maintain steadfast positions on this whole issue of identity. And only if we look at history has taught us many things. And you look at the nation of Canada, you look at Atlantic Canada, they never said they were Métis before the 80s. Never said they were at all. Never heard that one time coming out of that area. Nor also Barrie, Sarnia, all of those places. They didn't say they were Métis. It's only after the hard work of great leaders that put us in a constitution of clarity of who we are that the word Métis became symbolic with Section 35 rights. Then everybody started to say, well, I want a piece of that, especially when they start seeing us winning in courts. I remember my discussion with Paul Martin when he was Minister of Finance. He and I had a discussion, and I had a talk with him, and he was very inquisitive about the Métis people, and I was very proud of that. He wasn't Prime Minister. Mr. Mayor, I'll get to you right away. And so it is very clear, he wasn't the Prime Minister, but he was inquisitive as the Minister of Finance. And he wanted to know more about us. And I kept on explaining to him who we are as a Western people. And the reason he wanted to know more about us is the Minister of Finance. And I said to him, and proved to be true, I said, Paul, one day, that day will come, and we're going to beat you in a courtroom. We are going to beat you when we fight on our rights, and then you better be prepared to pay that bill. But if you don't help us, putting the process in place and clarifying once and for all who the Métis Nation is and defining those citizens and understanding what that population growth is and how big it is, only then as the Minister of Finance you'll be able to calculate the value of what that is going to cost this country. And my friends, they knew it was in the billions. So even then, Canada was looking at this. They saw we were coming, but so did everybody else in the East. They waited and waited and waited. Then all of a sudden we started winning our court cases. Then they start flourishing out and saying we want a piece of that. Clement is right. Many times we're good-hearted people. We try hard to find a way to balance things, just the nature of who we are. And I gave a story to some of you about when I first opened the first pharmacy of the Métis government. And we're doing unbelievably well with our pharmacy. But this to show you the nature of our people. My best friend, who passed away already, actually worked as employed at MMF for at least 20-something years, taking a ton of medication after he got ill. He went on long-term disability. And I challenged him, I questioned him, I said, oh, so how's the pharmacy serving you? He tried to stall, and Soto, we're talking Soto. He's trying to stall and change the subject. So I'm wondering, what the hell, it's a simple question. Like, how's our pharmacy treating you? Are you getting your pills on time? He didn't change his pharmacy. He's still in Dauphin with a non-Indigenous pharmacist. And so his wife tells on him and tells me that he didn't change his prescription to the Meadow pharmacy yet. So now we start arguing, me and him, and I raise my voice with him. Because all his kids went through MMF and exceptionally did well. All of them are working in health fields in different areas, and MMF government was there to help them. And he had a career at the Federation. And I asked him, why in the hell would you not be supporting your own government? Guess what he told me? And this is the character of who we are. But that pharmacist is nice to me. He smiles at me every time I go in. He treats me so nice. I don't want to hurt his feelings. That was his position. One of my best friends and a fighter is the only one in his family who did not take treaty because he believed so much in who he was. But yet he didn't want to hurt that pharmacist's position. He didn't want and I said, you tell me how much that pharmacist is giving your children to go to school. You tell me how much that pharmacist has done for you, besides smiling to you and giving you your prescriptions. Next day, he changed his prescription to the pharmacy. But it's important to understand the characteristics of who we are. And that's why when I fought the battle with Tony Belcourt, I see an article, he's speaking about the Métis Native Council of Canada. And they're going to continue to promote and express that these are Métis people. You heard from the people who actually are experts to tell you these people are not us. They're Algonquin, they're Ojibwe, but they're not us. They've changed the name to Voyageur now. But I want to say something to the gentleman that spoke from Ontario, from our homeland, and they do belong to our homeland. When I spoke to the presidents of Ontario from our homeland, they feel ostracized. They feel they're not included in the MNO because they're swamped. They are swamped by those that are not them. They're outnumbered by those that are not them. And if you look at our Board of Governors as we meet as a people, as Clement said, why are they then voting in their elections and dictating our future? Because their future is to include them, and that's what they're going to fight for. But even worse, when you look at our annual assembly, when our leaders come to vote across the nation, I've never seen Teresa sitting at that table, maybe the odd time. And she is part of the homeland, it's from Ontario, but she's sat to the side. And that should never be happening to our leader from our homeland. So it tells you how they feel in our homeland, in northern and western part of their province. They are swamped, they're ostracized, they're pushed. That's what's going to happen to all of us. The day will come, not tomorrow, we're still outnumbering them right now. But the day will come when they outnumber you. And when that day comes, you will not be able to turn that crystal ball around, because you will not have a chance to change it, because the policies and the rules and the constitutions will be changed to side with them. And you will not and should, in fact, look in the mirror and after and tell your child and your grandchildren you have failed them. Because we will fail them. We cannot allow this to happen. Yes, and I'll read a section from McCallum's letter that he sent to his citizens. He said, "It is critical that we work with MNO to resolve the matter of citizenship and that we find a way for the Métis Nation and these Section 35 voyageur communities to sort out the path forward." Why is it our responsibility to worry about those voyageur Métis that aren't us? Why we must carry the burden that we have to worry about them? They are Section 35, and if they're Section 35 rights holder, let them go to court like we did. Let them suffer like we did. Let them understand what it is to be ostracized and forgotten, to be looking through the windows as everybody else gets resources in this country and we get nothing. Watch our families die younger than they should. Our families suffer in hell because there's no programs. Our kids having no support in their families because there's no jobs and they're trying to get a career in education. We went through that for decades and decades and decades. So why is it our responsibility now to say we have to worry about those Section 35 voyageurs out there that are not us? Go to the Algonquin leadership. They're in your ban list anyway. Go to the Ojibways. Go fight for your Section 35 rights like we did. We waited 200 years. And let me be clear, as an MMF president, we will never, ever let that wall down. We will protect our nation through hell and back if we have to. So thank you very much.